so it may make it even worse.
All right. In that case, I will go ahead and see if I can clean things up on this end.
Oh yeah, it's looking better now. Did you just close something?
Yeah, I'm going through and turning off programs. All right, that should be better now.
Yep.
Okay. So let's start then from uh, that point that we were mentioning about personality view.
Yep.
That that first fetter is actually a teammate of the first three fetters, and so we kind of work on those three fetters together, and that in a way, it's actually just an intellectual exercise in the
Right.
sense that um, the first three fetters are actually just about knowledge, or it's about thinking. That the deeper fetters are the ones that go after the feelings.
Oh.
All right,
Right.
and and so the feeling of ill will that leads to anger and not liking destruction, and the feeling of greed or liking
Desire.
or desire, these are the primary two feelings
The
that are
pushing and
in
pulling.
the second noble truth.
Right.
Okay, and that third item on the eightfold, excuse me, the third item of the second noble truth is ignorance, and that's what we're dealing with these first three fetters. Let's get out of our ignorance so that now we can properly deal with these two major big feelings that we have. And then after we deal with them, then we can see the really deep underlying tendencies, the higher
Oh.
fetters.
Right. I see.
All right. Now, there are times and places where a person, no matter what stage of their development, they can, in fact, touch upon some of these higher fetters.
Right.
An example of that is that it's been known for many, many centuries, and the Bible has quite a lot to say about pride. The pride cometh before a fall, and
Right.
things like this. Okay,
Yeah.
but that um, the ordinary way of looking at it is that pride has an opposite, which would be humility.
Yes.
To where within the context of the teachings of the Buddha, that that pride actually comes out of a fetter that is called mana, and that mana actually means conceit, and that it is exhibited in competition,
Yep.
and that the competition has an endpoint to it, and that endpoint is friendliness when we stop competing.
Yep.
All right. So that means that we're coming to a balance or an equilibrium to where within Christianity and most modern philosophy now, that humility is the antidote for pride.
Yep.
But within the context of the teachings of the Buddha, oh no, humility is just another loser's mentality.
Yep.
All right, being humble means that you are humiliating, or that you are subverting or coming down to being something under the pride. So pride and
Mm.
humility work together within that context, because the people themselves are not really ready to deal with it, because they really haven't dealt with their lust and their anger and all of that kind of stuff. at the medium
Oh,
level.
okay.
And the reason that they haven't dealt with it at that level is because they haven't gotten the underlying truth, the underlying real knowledge
Right.
that, number one, the fetter of doubt is erased, which now you have the intellectual knowledge that you can do this.
Yeah.
You are the winner now. So it actually begins to change our attitude about things. So let's go back to that point about intellectual knowledge about who we are. Most of us have the intellectual knowledge, which has a lot of ignorance built into it, that I am my personality. This is just
Yeah.
who I am. But the Buddha breaks down that group that we create as what we call the personality, and he breaks them down into the five aggregates. The
Yeah.
five aggregates are actually the definition of who I am, and that ordinary ignorant people who have that level of ignorance are going to then um, misconstrue who I am with the various pieces that they find themselves to be.
Mm.
A very common one. In fact, this one is just mind-boggling that it's so big and so powerful and so obvious. Why can't humanity see this? And yet we don't. We're blind to it. And that's this. We are attached to the body. I am the body.
Yep.
And that I am the body gives rise to a number of industries that are actually, we don't
Yep.
need these industries at all. And I'm not talking about basic clothing industry or the cloth making industry. I'm talking about the fashion industry.
Yep.
I'm talking about the show off industry. Okay. Talking about that I am the body, which means now I have to, if I'm going to be beautiful, the body has to be beautiful. And so off to the gym we go. All
Yep.
right. So all physical exercises is about body beautiful. All of the clothing is about body beautiful. And look at cosmetics. And another industry that we could look at would be even the pharmaceutical and the medical industry. I am the body.
Yeah. But I suppose there's also the survival part of it.
Well, there is good reason for medical science. There are good reasons to have doctors.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people who go to the doctor are not going to the doctor for good reasons. They're taking up the doctor's time. The doctor might, in fact, if a doctor only dealt with actual sick people, he'd probably enjoy his job a lot better.
Yeah,
But
that's
most
true.
and I know because my mother took me to the doctor when I was a child, and I didn't understand what was going on until I got into psychology later to find out that my mom was a hypochondriac.
Ah.
Okay, which meant that she took me and went to the doctor more
Every
often
little
than
thing.
necessary.
Yeah.
Why? Because she didn't trust her own body. She didn't know her own body. Therefore, she wanted one doctor after another. Now, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, but I remember Mom's first doctor. He was Dr. Young. He was the one who born me. I actually, when I was about 4 years old, was able to ride in his airplane.
Haha. No way.
But uh, uh, the knowledge of doctors came later. When I saw my mom, when we would move to a new town, the first thing she'd do is establish the new doctor.
Right.
And I would go so far as to say that my dad's income alone may have been enough for us to have gotten by, but my mom always worked because she had doctor bills to pay.
Mm.
Why? Because of that over-identification, I am the body. Hypochondriacs are like that, but the fashion industry, beauty contest, all of that kind of stuff
Mm.
is based upon identification with the body. But that's only one of the 5 aggregates. Once we understand that I am not the body, I've got to put up with this one until it croaks, and when it does, so do I.
Mm.
But I am not this body. That we have to come to understand. Also, we are not the feelings. The second
Yeah.
aggregate is we are not the feelings, there is basically the way that it's said in the Pali is that the Buddha asked, "Is there a self in the body?" And the Buddhist monks answered, "No, sir,
No.
there is no self in the body," which is in English we'd say, "No, I am not the body."
Yep.
The self, whatever the self is, it's not this physical body.
Yep.
And then the feelings. There is no self in feelings, which means that, and this is kind of tricky, because most people think that they are their feelings, when in fact the feelings generally take over the self.
Yep.
In other words, the self is this, but the self is only this in relationship to what owns it,
Yep.
or what was the cause of the source of this self. What is the rationale of the regard for the self is anger. I am angry, or
Yep.
sad. I am sad, or happy. I am happy, or uh, uh, fearful. I am afraid. These are the kinds of things that we associate with being the body and the feelings as me,
Mm.
where in fact when we begin to investigate, we recognize, wait, number one, I'm not these feelings. And number
Yep.
two, I can disassociate myself from these feelings to recognize that whatever I am is higher than these feelings. But that with the untrained mind, the feeling becomes the boss.
Yep.
And so, therefore, I am that feeling, or I am my feelings. I am angry, etc., like that. But now we're recognizing, no, through wisdom, we can see I'm not the body, and I'm not these feelings.
It felt like the sense of self was just a mental idea, which was kind of just it wasn't really all that solid. It was just an idea, you know?
But it is that self that is the necessary ingredient for that which suffers.
Yeah.
Okay, anger in itself is not suffering, but when I am angry, now there's an I to suffer.
Yep.
And so
Exactly.
I am thrown into the hell world of suffering. Okay. In fact, what we're really talking a lot about paticca samuppada today, but we only got started with it from the concept of the 5 aggregates because we're looking at
Right.
this first Fetters.
Right.
But the entire teaching of the paticca samuppada is based around, we have to loosen our identity about who we are for one major reason, and that is that whoever I am not a fixed target. Whatever I am, I'm in motion. I'm a process.
Yeah.
I am not a fixed me. The me is constantly changing. It's constantly in flux, and often it's not even there.
So we grasp these aggregates. That's what makes them linger. The amount we grasp them.
hmm So we grow up in a delusion, and that delusion is supported by all of the adults around us who have that same delusion.
Yeah.
And that delusion is, I am a self, or I am a me, and I will grow up to be, and whatever that being is, that will be me, and that's the self. Okay? But the entire point that the Buddha is making about this is anicca, 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 anicca. Everything is in flux. Everything is in turmoil. Even me.
Mm.
And if it's me that's in flux and in turmoil, that has a significant point to it in the sense that that means I can change.
Yep.
And that also has the quality that if I can change, I can either change ignorantly, not knowing the change, or I can do it wisely by knowing the change.
Okay.
Okay, the change is going to occur. I'm going to get angry, and then I'm going to get sad, and then I'm going to be on top of the world, and then I'm going to be buried under it, and all of that thing keeps changing. And I keep saying, no, but it's still me. No, it's not the same you.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Not to say every time that emotion changes, it's actually a new me that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And that it can be changed. Not just changed overall or eventually, but changed right now. Always our choice. That we can change things at any minute. And what does that require? It require to wake up, investigate, look at what's going on. Okay? To literally wake up and smell to make sure it's coffee. That smelling that we're talking about, that's the investigation. To wake up and investigate, to see what's going on. Now, by doing so over and over and over again, this concept of me begins to weaken with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does take a while. I mean, I can generally talk them into the fact that there is no self. But it takes a while for us to actually figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
To figure out that whoever I am, it's changing. Whoever I am, I can actually decide what way it's going to change. I can change intentionally into the wholesome, and sometimes I can intentionally change into the unwholesome.
Mm.
But over a long time of training, we tend not to do that so much anymore, and we tend to only manage, when we're managing things, to manage out of the unwholesome into the wholesome.
Yep.
So, this whole quality of this first fetter is this understanding that we can change. That's an important quality. That's actually the quality of the coming out of doubt, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first quality of doubt is that I need help, which means I cannot change myself enough to get myself out of the jam I'm in. That's why we wanted Jesus, is because
Mm.
I'm a sinner, and it's an original sin, and I can't get out of it on my own. I need help.
It's the magical thinking.
Magical thinking, right? Well, we got that magical thinking started because of the ways that our mommies operated, was
Yep.
to come and help the little kid. Okay, and so we grew up from childhood thinking that we needed help with some things, which meant that basically we never fully grew up. When we grow up
Mm.
completely, that means that we are not just self-sufficient, but we're actually capable of taking care of others. That we
Mm.
become an actual caregiver, not just someone who wants to be a caregiver so that they can get care back,
Yeah.
which is the helper's mentality.
Yep.
So, actually, Eric Byrne and TA is really big on that helper's mentality. That was my mom, too. She was a helper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
Which meant that
Yeah.
if she couldn't help somebody, she felt bad.
Mm-hmm.
Helpers and hypochondriacs, I think they tend to go together.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're opposites of the same
Oh
coin.
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
So, this helper hypochondriac mentality that we get into, we learned that from our parents. And then we live our lives thinking, and we grow up to it also, in the sense that now it's an ingrained habit that we have. But then along comes something else going on, and that is the belief that I am
Mm-hmm.
permanent. And this is just a belief, just a conception, but this is one of the things that is taught in religion because they need that self to be permanent, everlasting, for two reasons. One is because if it is a self that is permanent, unchanging, and everlasting, it cannot fix itself. And number two, which is the bigger deal, is that if it is in fact uh, permanent and everlasting, then it is completely manipulatable.
Yep.
Only a no self is not manipulable. In other words, if you've got the perfect baseball, then you could play all kinds of baseball with it. If it's a really high quality, excellent baseball, you can beat the crap out of it, and it's still good ball, right?
Mm.
And so this is where we have the idea of the eternal soul, which means that it's strong enough to survive death,
Yep.
but it is not strong enough to survive God. God's going to take that
Yeah.
baseball or that football and he's going to play ball with it. He's going to kick it into hell or into heaven according to his whims. And so you better suck up to him. In fact, sucking up to God is more important than your sin
Yeah.
because you cannot help your sin, but you can help sucking up. Okay? And so that's what religion has come to, is not that we can in fact get out of our own trouble, but that we have to suck up, and that keeps us in that victim's position. So that's one of the reasons why Buddhism, the teachings of the Buddha, is liberating
Mm.
to where Christianity is not liberating.
Yeah.
And because of that, all of the people who go into Christianity, they suffer under the same things that they would have normally. Now they just light a fire to it.
Haha. Yeah.
Okay. So not only does the preacher have to deal with all the other kinds of stuff that non-preachers have to deal with, he also has to deal with the little girls in the audience and the collection plate.
Yeah.
And he has not the skills to deal with either one of them successfully because
Mm.
he's a sinner too.
Yep.
And that's what brings so many scandals into religions. And you can
Yeah.
see that it's not that the scandals are new, it's that the scandals are newly publicized because of um, cameras and internet and
Yep.
technology and things coming to light. So that um, what happens in an altercation with the police, the judge will listen and believe the cop's point of view.
Yep.
But if we've got actual evidence from the video of what happens, now things are going to start to change.
Yep.
Okay? And that's what's happening with Christianity is that it's kind of losing ground because people are beginning to see the knowledge is coming.
Yeah.
And that part of the knowledge that people have to gain is that they can change. They're not stuck the way that Christianity teaches them that they are stuck.
Mm.
That, that you do not have to get forgiveness from your sins. You can stop the sin. You
Yeah.
can stop missing the mark. You can make a change. This
Change
is
right
what that
now.
first letter is all about.
Mm.
And yet so much of it has gotten that it's philosophical, and that in also with the idea with rebirth, that in
Yep.
Christian that Buddhism has its own version of that. If you don't mind, I'll go off into that rat hole for a little while. It's not even a rabbit hole; it's a rat hole,
Go for it.
and that is that you see, all throughout Southeast Asia, there has been the influence of Hinduism that had the influence from the Brahmins that had to do with your state of your life now depends upon
The
your past
previous.
existence.
Yep.
That's what Brahmins were teaching, because there was a time when they began to have trouble maintaining their power. The Aryans were giving them a fierce competition. And so and they didn't have much of an army to speak of
Mm-hmm.
either. And so their defense was, oh, well, we are the priest. We've got to run the religion. You can't run this religion. Only the Brahmins can run the religion. That's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, but we are born Brahmin. You cannot become a Brahmin by doing a ceremony. You've got to be born Brahmin. And that we're lucky because we were born Brahmin, and we were born Brahmin not simply because of luck, it's because we were good in the past. And that you were not Brahmin, which means that you were somehow not so good as us in the past. And that story that I just told you got started in about 800 BC.
Oh,
Fast forward
okay.
about 300 years, and it's beginning to get stuck in there. And this is when the Buddha run across it. And already at 300 years, you see, it wasn't that set in.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of teachers who were saying, ain't true.
Okay. That's
Okay,
why
so
he uses those terms in his teachings to kind of shake up the beliefs.
to shake up the belief system, because the belief system in a permanent self prevents people from getting on the path and practicing the method, because the underlying prevention is, I can't change, I cannot fix myself, I have to have the big karma machine or the Brahmin ceremony or something like that to help me, because I
Mm.
can't help myself.
Yep.
And the whole teachings of the Buddha is, yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can change yourself.
Just need to remember
Exactly. Why do we have to remember that? Is because we have been taught for so
our
long, so
previous
many times
habits.
from the old previous habits, that no, you can't change. You have to do what you're told to do, and then maybe you'll get a reward from doing what you're told to do. But you didn't earn it. You didn't do it. It was given to you kind of as a gift, which also is all about the karma, in the sense of, you do good to get a good result, and you do bad and you'll get a bad result. And that this is actually something that we can use to create a society. Because if people do not believe that there is good and bad action that gives good and bad results, then we'll wind up in anarchy.
Yep.
We'll wind up in barbarianism. We'll wind up in very primitive states. And this is, in fact, the Buddha, he talks about that in the sense of wrong view.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I use the word wrong view is by the little phrase, I can get away with it.
Yep.
And so most of those things start with, I can get away with it because.
Mm.
And here's some of the answers. I can get away with it because Allah is merciful.
Mm-hmm.
I can get away with it because I can go to the confessional and confess and get forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I can get away with it because there is no God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can get away with it because there is no karma. There is no
Mm-hmm.
results of good and bad action. Okay? And I can get away with it because, after all, my mom and my dad are nothing to me. There's no origins. I can
Mm.
get away with it because there are no mystics or gurus or holy people are in that. They're all a bunch of charlatans. Okay, so this is kind of the attitude. I can get away with it because I know what's best.
Mm.
And this is a wrong view, because it always winds up in a disaster of some sort or another.
Yep.
Okay. I won't even mention Donald Trump as a good example. So, the right view, ordinary right view, comes back with, oh no, you can't.
Mm.
Oh no, you can't get away with it. But the right noble view is look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
But let's do that one later. Right now, we're going to have to say, well, you cannot get away with it, and that's when the let us say the actual law of karma that does exist in the form of cause and effect. That in fact, in the Lion's Roar Sutta, the Buddha talks about that he knows karma, and the results of karma is based upon the cause and effect. It's immediately. If you stick your hand in the fire, you do not have to wait 300 years for it to burn.
Yep.
It happens now, okay? And yet, um, when the guy who has wrong view says, I can get away with it, the other guy has to say, oh, no, you can't. Someday you'll get caught.
Mm.
Well, that someday actually is what puts that time reference into karma. And the reality of the situation that time and distance or time and speed are interrelated at the square of the inverse, 1 over x squared. Or like E equals mc squared, we'll take the c squared and put it on the other side of the equation, and E divided by the speed of light is the mass. So this is the point that we're talking about, okay? Which means that any action that a human takes in the realm of physics, the ability for that reaction to happen diminishes very quickly because it's at the square of the distance and time from it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know that in the time of the Brahmins. They thought that it was steady state.
Yep.
This action has this weight.
Diminishes.
But now we're understanding, oh no, all action, including light itself, which is nothing but an action, does diminish at the square of the distance, or at the
Mm.
square of the speed of light, because in fact the speed of something and the distance it is from you are directly related.
Mm.
Speed and distance are in fact the same thing, just like time and space are the same thing.
Speed and distance are the same thing.
Yeah. Can you wrap your head around time and space are the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's your space and there's your time.
I can wrap my head around the space and time thing, but not the speed and distance thing. Why not?
Okay, well, space is your distance and speed is your time.
I think I see what you mean.
It takes a little physics to understand that, but yes, space and time means that speed and distance are directly related to the point that they're the same thing. How far something is away from you has to do with the speed that it left.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Now you see it. Okay,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, how far something is away from you has directly to do with how fast it's traveling away from you.
Yeah.
And then you measure the time.
Yep.
And the faster it's going in this relationship to time, then the further it is away. Karma and our actions work exactly that way too, which means
Mm-hmm.
it's unlikely for the karma machine to dig you up 300 years after you've been buried just to kick you in the ass. Not likely to happen like that. But this is an old story, and the old story works. It works because it helps one person control another.
So what about when you remember something from the past? Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, but remembering something from the past must be a result of the intensity of that thing that happened in the past.
You're right, it does have a lot to do with it. The example that I often use is Johnny is writing on the wall in his bedroom. He's got his crayons out, and it's a painted wall, and he's enjoying the heck out of himself for 10 or 15 minutes, and then Mommy comes in, and she does not like it at all, and she throws a hissy fit.
Yep.
Years later, Johnny's going to more remember the hissy fit that Mom had, and he's not going to remember so much the 20 minutes of pure delight he had in drawing on the wall.
I actually have
He's
a
barely
very
going to
similar experience.
remember what he wrote on the wall, but he's certainly going to remember Mom.
Yep.
Okay, so we tend to remember the big, heavy episodes.
Yep.
Why is that? Because we need that kind of information for survival. We need to remember danger as danger so that we can recognize danger later. And that serves us well if we live in a dangerous world.
Yep.
But we've been successful enough so that now we don't live in a dangerous world, but we still have those instincts.
Yeah.
And because of that instinctual world, we build up a lot of really heavy-duty episodes, and we remember them. And what happens when we do free association and the mind just is wandering, like wandering around in the past, more than likely within 10 or 15 thoughts, you'll run across one of these time bombs.
Yeah.
Like the kid can remember, I remember that bedroom. Oh, that was such a nice bedroom. I remember this pillow, and I remember that sheet, and I remember drawing on the wall, and I remember my mommy. And now we're in suffering.
Yep.
And so that's exactly how that particular stuff happens, is that we tend to rummage around in the past until we stumble on something that's painful.
Yeah, that is exactly what happens. Yeah.
And this is a very good reason for staying out of the past.
Yep.
But there's another good reason for staying out of the past, too, for the meditator. And that is that over time in your meditation practice, and as you're practicing the Eightfold Noble Path and living a higher quality, more noble life, that means that your standards are higher now than they were when you were a kid. In fact, our whole lives, our standards have never been stationary, never been that way. Our standards are always moving up and down depending upon the circumstances.
Yep.
But because of the idea of self, that's kind of like, well, my standards, that's part of who I am. I've got these standards.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that just proves right there that you're not the self that you thought you were, because we can prove that your standards have been changing.
They're always changing.
Right. So because of that, and now our standards are very high, that means when we go into the past, we're going to be going into areas that we know of where our behavior is not going to meet up to the standards that we hold for ourselves now.
Yep.
That's another good reason to stay out of the past. Let's stay in friendly territory, and that's enemy territory back in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that is in fact the part of the intellectual understanding that we come to. This is also part of the teaching of personality view, in the sense that the past is dangerous.
Yeah.
And yet,
Definitely.
most of the time ordinary people spend a lot of their time in the past reminiscing about who am I and what I did and this is me and all of that kind of stuff. And that's why it's so fraught with danger. They're going to run across something and it's going to stub their mental toe on it. And it's going to hurt. But here we are, we're learning to stay out of dangerous territories. We're learning to stay out of the hindrances of the mind, to keep the mind from being that kind of restless, so it wanders into our own self-manufactured cesspools of the past. So this is that first fetter. And that the whole point about rebirth within Buddhism, I don't know quite where that came from, but I do know that it had the quality that it happened at the time of Ashoka, to where before the time of Ashoka, the teachings of the Buddha were quite pure, in the sense that
there was no rebirth in the teachings then, back then.
There's no teachings of rebirth
No
anywhere in this.
way. Oh, wow.
And yet the later literature has it, because in 300 BC time frame, 270, that 300 BC was when King Asok took Buddhism on as what you would call a royal patronage,
Yeah.
or he started supporting it, which meant and he did a lot of really, really good stuff. He built a lot of
Yep.
roads. Not only did he build roads, but he planted both sides of the roads with trees, and every 10 miles or so he would put a way station. So he really did connect things around like that. But another thing that he did was that he built monasteries, and he put a lot of the teachings of the Buddha into print and had it chiseled into stone and had edicts put all over the place. In fact, it was in the 1980s when they finally found Lumpini, which was the birthplace of the Buddha.
Yep.
How did they find it? They dug up a stone that had
Engravings.
literally, it was engraved with the stuff from King Asok. And it says, I am King Asok, and this is the place where the Buddha was born. I mean, and that just nailed it right then.
Yep.
We've got it now. We know where the Buddha was born, because the Lumpini was nailed with an obelisk or something like that. So this is what Asok did. But the problem was is that he also made robe and arms round very easy to do for the Buddhist monks, but he didn't do it for all of the mendicants, which meant that there was a great influx into the Buddhist tradition at about this time.
Mm-hmm.
Huge numbers of new students. Too many for individual teachers to sit down with each of the students and explain this stuff to them, which meant then the students came and they talked to themselves. They didn't have the old elders. They didn't have the Tara. All they had was the big boat. And in fact, there was a conference held, the third conference, and that King Asok actually supported the conference. Bad idea, because that meant that it was held in Rajgriha, the capital. The monks themselves, if they were going to hold a campus, they could have held it in Satanya or out in the woods someplace. But oh
Anyway,
no,
yeah.
the king wanted it to be in the capital, which meant now you're there with all of the monks who don't belong in this council. Only the Theras should be in the council.
Right,
Well,
yeah.
nobles know how to ask questions of nobles to check to see whether they're noble or not. Because at the first time when I heard this story, I said, well, how did they figure that out? And that was actually an interesting question to solve, because that defines, how do you know who is noble or not?
Mm.
The answer is, you can ask some people some questions. Sometimes they're tricky questions, and you can trick them into giving an ordinary answer instead of giving a noble answer, and they kind of give themselves away. So this is how it was chosen. Well, the monks who did not get into this council were unhappy because they could not get in. So what did they do? They had their own council. This was called the Maha Sangha.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually the beginning of the breakup between the Mahayana and the Theravada, the teachings of the elders.
Uh-huh.
Now, that did not mean that things remained in the sense that only Theravadas can be noble and Mahayana cannot be, because it's really clear that there's a lot of nobles in the Mahayana tradition. A really easy, clear example of that is the Dalai Lama. It's really easy and clear to see that he is noble if you know the right questions to ask.
Yep.
And you know the right history from it. So, in that regard, this is where the Sangha got polluted. And from that time forward, there has the idea of rebirth, but even in the sutras. So I've been on Reddit and seen that some of my friends have asked them, well, what's the difference between Buddhist rebirth and Hindu reincarnation.
All right.
And we can't come up with an answer because there's not anything in the sutras to talk about it like that.
I actually there was a time like maybe 6 months ago or so when I actually did that search on Reddit. I searched rebirth in all the related subreddits, and yeah, it's definitely a gray area.
Well, it's only gray because the primary reason is because of the Christian influence and the belief in a soul is so common that belief in that kind of rebirth. Now, the word jati doesn't necessarily mean birth in the sense of giving birth to a baby. That
Hmm.
even in English, we have various uses for the word birth.
Yeah.
A berth is where you keep a ship, and a berth is where the sailor sleeps on the ship. So the
Oh,
berth
really?
can be a bed. Yeah,
Oh, I did not know that.
you weren't in the Navy.
That's true.
Yeah, so you have your berth. That's your rack. The Army, they call it the rack, but in the Navy, they can call it a berth. So, and we also have it a key, a bay, a berth, port. All of those words are simultaneously. That's where the ship is docked. Um, and so the English language berth is used many different ways too. If I were going to say there is a real difference between Buddhist rebirth, the ordinary kind of Buddhist, and reincarnation, it could be seen from Sutta number 38, where the Buddha is ferocious with Sati, son of a fisherman, about how wrong he is to think that it is consciousness that goes from uh, uh, round of rebirth so that the consciousness can experience the results of good and bad karma. And
Yeah, but
then the
it
Buddha
can't.
really gives him a hard time, and then he talks long about consciousness is dependently arising
With the phenomena.
with the phenomena. When you have an object and you have eyes and you have sight. When
Yeah,
there is no object, you have no sight.
yeah,
When you close your eyes, you have no sight. So consciousness in that regard, the seeing, is based upon conditions. It's a conditionality, cause and effect.
yeah,
Everything is subject to cause and effect, but they try to get away with saying, "Oh no, the self is not subject to cause and effect, except by the karma machine. Only the karma machine can do cause and effect with the self. Other than that, it's permanent, right?" It's like logic here. I don't think so. And so there is no real understanding between Buddhist rebirth and Hindu
reincarnation.
reincarnation, but the Buddha was very clear in many of the suttas where these guys who do believe in reincarnation, he says, aha, the Buddha's talking about rebirth right here, right here, right here. You get down to the bottom of the sutta, and he says, therefore, O monks, do not be reborn. Well, what that means is we got to have a different view of what the word rebirth here means, because it's not the rebirth of a self, it is the actual birth of this concept of a self, or this thing which we think of ourselves as the self. But in fact, it only becomes that self when it goes into a woeful state. So basically, we can say that the human mind, like you and I are sitting here, the mind is in a human state with the human frontal cortex operating.
Yeah,
Therefore, how we would be reborn into a woeful state. And these woeful states are the same states mentally that people associate with the world of rebirth or reincarnation, in the sense that you can be reborn in hell, or you can be reborn in heaven, or you can be reborn as an animal, or you can be reborn as a ghost. These are the physical things that people can be reborn to. That in fact in Christianity they have only heaven and hell. The issue with hell is easy to understand. God don't like you, and you got to suffer. But hell is a bit, heaven is a bit of an interesting thing, because heaven is a nice place, right?
Yeah.
But you're not in charge. You still got to
Nope.
go around and do what you're told to do.
Yep.
Let's look at it like this: the pickpocket, he repents, and then he dies, and now he's reborn in heaven as a pickpocket. What are the people in heaven going to assume about this guy who's a pickpocket? He goes around picking everybody's pocket. Well, what about the preacher who winds up in heaven, but now he molests all the little girls and he takes some money out of the offering plate? What's God going to do with these people? Are these the kind of people that you want in heaven?
Nope.
By definition, no, they don't belong, so they're going to get kicked out anyway, right? So what kind of heaven was it for them anyway? They're still acting the same way that they did on earth, and they still had the same punishments that they did on earth. I don't see this value of heaven. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's very interesting.
And it gets really specific that way when we talk about it in these four woeful states. In other words, what I'm saying is heaven is a woeful state.
Yeah. And that's yeah, wow.
And so here is how it plays out. Let's first look at the other three first, because it's very easy to see that these are woeful states.
Yep.
One of them is hell.
Yep.
What is the highest quality of hell? What's one thing that you can say about hell that everybody understands? Yes, that's hell. The answer is, I don't like it. I want out of here.
Yeah,
That's the quality
definitely.
of hell. Okay, it may not have to do with what kind of fire and what kind of brimstone or whether it's ice or whatever like that. The point is that we don't like it. We want out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's exactly the mental state that we have of being angry and frustrated, or full of anxiety and tension. We don't like it, and we want out of this. We want out of here. So when we are reborn in hell, we don't have to die and then be reborn in hell because of a common machine or God. We actually are reborn. Ourself is reborn into this woeful state because of the feelings that came up.
Mm.
And these feelings is what puts us into that woeful state.
Yeah.
So
Because we
anger
decided.
is associated with I don't like it.
Yeah.
I want out of here. Ill will. Everything about anger is ill will.
Yep.
Okay, I want out of it. I don't want it. I don't like it. Okay, so let's look at the opposite of that. The opposite of that is I like it. I want it.
Yeah.
I want it. I gotta have it. I gotta have more. I like it. I like it. I like it. Oh, she's so gorgeous. Oh, I want her. Let me see if I can get her to take her clothes off. Okay, I want more. I want more. I want more. That's the
Always
state
wanting
of
more.
the ghost. I am born in the woeful state of being a hungry ghost that cannot be filled. Years ago, there was a set of movies called Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep.
One of the movies had all of the ghosts they were having a great big party. And as they were drinking the alcohol, the whiskey, it would come through their mouths, down through their bones,
Yep.
and wash
I
out.
remember
And
that.
they never got any benefit of what they were drinking.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the quality of a ghost.
Yep.
The ghost is, it doesn't matter what he wants, he's not going to get it.
Yep.
The next one is the one that I find most Westerners in, and that is the animal world. What is the animal world? The animal is the one who is trained to do what he's told to do, and he gets no benefit or reward from it.
Mm-hmm.
So we start training our children as animals. You go clean your room. Why? Not because, child, you want a clean room and therefore you go clean your own room out of your own willingness, which is one of the ways to do it. It's no, the boss, the big person, the
Yep.
gorilla in the room, daddy, is saying, you go clean your room because I want it clean.
Yep.
But the
Doing
right
what
way
you're
for daddy
told.
to do it, if daddy wants the kid's room clean, he can go with the boy into the room and make a game out of cleaning the room. Because
Mm-hmm.
the kid actually probably would like to have his room cleaned up also.
Yep.
And if instead of being an angry situation, they can make it joyful, then the child will enjoy cleaning up his room.
Yep.
I've seen that.
Exactly.
I've also seen kids really hate it. So we teach our kids in school to do what you're told to do. You learn your ABCs. You learn to read three-letter words, and we give you the reward of going to the second grade, where you have to learn four-letter words.
Yep.
All these numbers you've learned, now you have to learn to add them together. And when
Yeah.
you learn how to do that, guess what? Your reward is we've got a third grade for you.
Yep.
And on and on and on it goes until we finally graduate from high school. And what have we got now? We either go get a job or we go to more school. But
Yeah.
whenever we get out of school, what is the reward for getting out of school? A job? That's
Work.
how we're rewarded after 16 years of all of this work?
Yep.
More work? That's our reward?
Yeah. It's I've been thinking about that so much over the last few months. Just, is that really a good way to live?
Exactly. And that's the way. So we are, in fact, the self is reborn as an animal.
Yep.
And the qualities of that, taking that birth, is that we do what we're told to do because it's instinctual, but we do not get a reward for it.
Mm.
So the guy goes to work in the morning, and he, in fact, if he would, he could enjoy that job, but he doesn't. He does it because of the paycheck. But the
Yeah.
paycheck is not
Thinking about the
guaranteed.
future.
Always thinking about the future, and we don't get our reward for the moment. And so this is the woeful state of being an animal. And most humans are in that animal state of being unhappy and miserable doing what they're told to do. This actually is one of the instincts. It's the herding instinct or the nesting instinct. Go along to get along.
Mm.
And so there's one more, and that's the one that we were going to talk about. And that is the heavenly world. And in the Pali, it's referred to as asuras. The Ashura is actually the same level in the Pantheon as in Greece, the Titans, giving names like
Titans.
yeah, the Titanics are
Ah.
warriors. The Titans are the Asuras are the warriors, and they are in battle gear. They are heavily trained. They are ready for battle. They are all dressed up with no place to go. What do we mean by that? This is, in fact, that fourth feeling that we haven't talked about. The going along to getting along, the wanting things that we don't have, and the anger and frustration of hell has a source, a bottom line. The bottom of all of this is fear. And this is the Asuras, is that they are afraid to go to battle.
Mm.
Why? Because that's the lowest level of heaven.
Yep.
The higher levels of heaven will beat the snot out of them, and they know it, and so they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
go to battle. But they're the big warriors. Okay. See how many times that happens in our life. A good example is the kid's done his practice on his piano. It's recital time. The teacher calls him up. Now it's his time to play, and he freezes.
Mm. Yep.
Or the kid's out on stage. Okay, we have things like stage fright. This is
Yep.
that frozen state of the Asuras. And then we recognize, wait a minute, we do that a lot.
Yeah.
and don't know that when we're doing our meditation, if we're not careful, we'll get into a very, very shallow breathing that we need to maintain, even if it's a long, long, long deep in breath. That's okay, but we don't want it to become a long, shallow breath. We want it to be a deep so that we're getting the oxygen that we need, even if we're down to 2 or 3 breaths a minute. 3 breaths a minute is only 20 seconds. That's an actual easier one. 2.5, that's getting there. 2 breaths a minute, that takes some real settling down. But it's still always a long breath. It's not a shallow breath. We don't lose the breathing. Okay? And that's where we talk about with the Asuras is that they're literally out of breath. They don't breathe because they're scared. They're
Yeah.
afraid. And so these are the 4 woeful states that come out of clinging. Each one of the 4 modes of clinging will take us into one of these 4 hell states or one of these 4 woeful states, and it's always the self that is created to go there. So it is literally the self is the vehicle or the vessel for dukkha. If we don't go into one of these 4 woeful states, then there is no suffering. But the suffering is almost guaranteed once we get to the mode of clinging, because it's going to go one after the other into that. That we have to stop things at an earlier place. And the place
So,
that we want to stop things is at the feeling level.
yeah, so I noticed that when there's thoughts, it's very easy to just come out of the thoughts and come into the now as soon as I remember. But the feelings, they linger because they're still being held onto, and that's where the work needs to be done.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. What I
No?
would say is that they linger because they have a deeper level of body chemistry. In other
Oh,
words,
okay.
once I start leaking a lot of adrenaline into my system, even though I recognize that I'm doing that and put a stop to it, that adrenaline that's in the system needs to be breathed out and to be taken care of.
Right.
It's not just adrenaline, but cortisol and some really nasty other stuff gets into the blood. Pretty poisonous stuff gets in there. And then
Yeah.
it takes a little while to drain that stuff out, even when we're really good at draining it out.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah.
So, for instance, anxiety can be breathed out, but it may take 5 or sometimes even 10 breaths. If we can keep focused and keep watching for that 10 breath time, we can recognize, oh, you know something? That anxiety is going down.
Mm.
An easier one to deal with would be tiredness. That when we recognize that we're tired because we're not getting enough breathing, that our breathing has gotten too shallow, 3 or 4 breaths is all we need. I feel better now.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of it has to do with breathing, but yes, some of the feelings take a while.
Okay.
That even, here's an example also, that people can become instantly afraid, very afraid of something,
Yep.
and then they recognize that it's not true. Even after they recognize that it's not true and there was no reason for me to be afraid, still the fear lingers.
Yes. That's
An
true.
example of that is the old man walks into his house and he sees the belt that he left on the floor, but he mistakes it for a snake.
Haha.
And he panics. And he closes the door and he says, "What am I got to do something?" And then he goes and he opens the door again and says, "Wait a minute, that's not a snake, it's a belt." But he's still got the fear.
Yeah.
Even if he picks up the belt and throws it across the room and laughs, he's still got that adrenaline. He's
All those
still got them
chemicals.
chemicals in the body that they don't relax that quickly.
Yeah.
They can, but it seems like that they can be, um, let us say, pumped up or turned on almost instantly.
Yep.
Within a second or two, they can be. You can flood the whole body with fear.
Yep.
Then it takes 20 or 30 seconds for that fear to drain out. But if
So
we
you
pay
need
close
to.
attention to it, we can cut that time down in half.
Well, eventually, you can just not experience the fear, right? You can just stop it.
Well, the easy way to do that is open the door and look at the belt and say, "That's a belt."
Yep.
I investigated, I looked at it, and I saw that it's a belt.
Yep. So
Not a
investigation.
right investigation. That and then basically, so this fear that we have is mostly coming out of ignorance. We're mistaking it.
Yeah.
We think that there's something there when there's nothing there to be afraid of.
Yeah.
That's why I
Exactly.
often will ask the students, look at the room you're in. It's a safe place, isn't it? No real danger there. So why do you feel fear? Because you're in a safe place. The answer is we're in the habit of feeling that fear.
Yep.
But now we can look around and say, yeah, Dhammaraja was right. This room is not dangerous.
Yep.
And by doing that investigation and recognizing that, we can actually begin to come out of that fear within a few seconds. But it does linger. You're exactly
Okay.
right. It doesn't, because we're talking about body chemistry here. So where the things that happen in the mind are really, really fast. But if it turns that anger or that fear faucet on and lets it run for a while, even when we turn it back off, which may take just an instant. I mean, the guy saw it was not a snake; it was a belt.
Yep.
Immediately, it was like turning that faucet off. Now there's no more fear coming into the system, but boy, is there a lot of it already there.
So it all depends on how you react to it, whether you react to it wisely or not. So if you don't
Investigate.
like it, then you're in a woeful state. But if you just investigate it and see it just with a neutral perspective and just see what it's like, then, well, that's the goal.
So this is the point then that we can make, that it's easy and quick to get into the woeful states, but it's not so easy and quick to get out of them. You can get into it within a second or two.
Yep.
To come back out of it may take 20 or 30 seconds.
Yep. Right.
And this is all useful for investigation. Keep looking, to keep monitoring, to keep knowing. And so basically what we've been talking about for this past hour is the whole issue of who am I? The answer is I am not
Not
that
these
man,
things.
the fear that saw a belt and thought it was a snake.
Yep.
I'm not that guy. At that one particular instant in time, yes, but mostly no.
Yeah.
Mostly I'm not that guy. And then when we recognize I am mostly not all of the things that I thought I was.
Yeah. They're always changing.
Always changing. Whatever the predominant aspect of an individual is, according to them, is actually probably not even 50%, probably not even 10% of their personality. Because personalities are very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And there's no real self
There's a
in
lot of.
any of it.
It's all just habit.
Yep.
Which is
So
why it
what are
can
we going
feel
to do about
automatic
it? We're going to
sometimes.
wake up and we're going to see it. That's right. We're going to wake up and we're going to see what's going on. Investigate, investigate, investigate.
Mm.
And there is no you, but yet there is a you to be reborn when you go into one of these woeful states. That's when the self actually is born.
Mm.
You can be reading a book or watching TV. You can be watching the news and absorbing the news. And then the newsman will say something you don't like. And now we take birth. I
Mm.
don't like that. And I become angry. Okay? That's the birth of the self right there.
Mm-hmm.
Who was I before that?
Can't
I was a
remember.
servant. Don't, it's not important. But when I become a self, and so we remember the big times, we remember the
Yep.
heavy stuff, and so we begin to get the delusion that I am permanent self, to where in
Yep.
fact I'm not. I'm not. The memories change, the way we do perception changes, the way we conceive things, the way we're conscious of things, the way we feel, the body, all of that is in flux. There is no entity or a self there anywhere.
Mm.
And that is marvelous, because that means that you have full freedom to be who you want to be. That you are not bound and determined by destiny to be that which you already have become.
Yeah, I feel like when you identify with being a certain thing or believing a certain thing or thinking a certain way, it kind of limits you to everything that's not agreeing with that. But if you don't
Exactly
feel that
so.
way, you can be whatever you want to be.
Your choice.
Yeah. So that's all the first fetter.
That's the first fetter. The second fetter is to recognize that much of who we thought we were is actually just learned behavior from the outside. And that all of those ingredients from the outside in the amalgamation that it came about was the monster called me, which means that all of the constituent components of this monster came, number one, from not me, from the outside, and two, these are ingredients of a monster.
Yeah. Which means they're not good and can't really blame yourself.
Right. Why should we blame ourselves when in fact we're just, subject to all of the stuff that's been given to us? And
Which
so
means
that
you are
second
not your
fetter,
past.
and so that second fetter really bugs us in the sense that we've got this memory system, this part of the mind that keeps giving us orders.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because that's how we got that information. Was we were given as child, we were given orders. Go clean your room,
Yep.
go do this mathematics, go do your homework, all of that. And so we actually begin to speak to ourselves in that same language that we
Mm-hmm.
had from the parents.
Yep.
And so this is what Byrne calls the parent ego state. The parent ego state is all that parent stuff, all the orders and the ways and the shoulds and the woulds and everything like that that made us miserable as children. We learned that, and now we're making ourselves miserable as adults
Yep.
by playing those old tapes over and over and over and over again. So that's and they come in the form of hindrances,
Yep.
shoulds. I want this. I like that. You got to do it this way, etc., like that. And so when we throw all of that stuff out, then we can be at peace. We can just be happy. We don't have to go around doing all of the orders that we have been storing up for us to do.
We can enjoy what we're doing. We can enjoy what's going on.
So the parent ego state then could be that which is considered to be Sila Bhatta Paramasa, where we store all of our rites, rules, rituals, and everything is in this parent ego state, and we learned that from our parents. That's why we label it the parent ego state. Freud
Mm.
called it the superego.
Yeah.
But the actual way of looking at it is all that stuff that we got from all of the adults when we were kids, we now let all of that stuff ruin our lives when
Yep.
we could, as an adult, we could have fun. We don't have to listen to any of that stuff anymore.
Yep.
And we can see that as hindrance. Those are the hindrances. It's all of the orders and all the rules and all the laws and everything like that. And we can throw that stuff out and be at peace. And once we do that enough, then that means that the doubt becomes less and less and less.
Yeah.
And when we finally come to the point that we know, number one, nobody's going to do it but me. Number two, I'm up to the task. And number three, this Eightfold Noble Path that the Buddha has provided is good enough, is adequate for the job. Which means now I have all three of the kinds of doubts eradicated. That's the third fetter, which is voiced in this phrase: knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. The knowledge and vision of what is the path is the Eightfold Noble Path. The knowledge and vision of what is not the path is all of this past knowledge, all of these ideas about me and who I am, and all of that. So the actual third fetter of knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path can only happen once we understand personality view and Sila Bhatta Paramasa, or our attachments to rules and rituals. Once we get rid of those two, now we're ready. Now we're ripe for really understanding that this path does take us to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the first three fetters. And that's our practice. And we keep practicing that over and over and over again. And during that practice, we're developing actually the skills that we need now to deal with the deeper fetters of ill will and greed.
Mm.
So this is the path. And this is
Yeah.
why these first three fetters are so important. This is the knowledge part of it.
They set the foundation for everything.
Yes. And personality view is the basic. That's your cornerstone.
Mm-hmm.
That's your point that most of the weight of the entire practice goes on, who am I? And the answer is nobody knows and nobody cares.
Yup.
Let's have fun instead.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Just like, don't worry about that, just have fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a delightful conversation, and I'm glad that you're practicing well, Chintan. This is good.
Yeah, this is it's been a very insightful conversation.
Okay. Well, we'll see you later.
See you, Dhammarato.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.